All right, and helping us to look further into immigration law in this regard is, of course, immigration law expert, Mr. Ashraf Essop. Mr. Essop, it's a great pleasure to have you with us, sir. So if you can, please clarify some very confusing factors with this detainee current situation, right? The Israeli camp is alleging that they acted as a result of the breach of its maritime or international laws by the Flotilla. Please help us understand exactly what these sentiments mean.
So let's look at the historical background of the blockades and the attempts to break the blockade. You remember that in January 2009, in a operation called Operation Cast Lead, a similar thing happened where there was a Turkish ship, Mavi Marmara, that tried to enter and breach the blockade because there was starvation, etc., going on. At that time, there was a violent confrontation, and the Israeli naval commando were accused of killing up to 10 people on that. Mm-hmm. Now, subsequently, the whole problem comes down to, is there a legal basis for Israel to try and blockade vessels that are coming in with humanitarian and other kind of aid? Mm-hmm. So one has to look at the so-called San Remo Manual on Naval Warfare, which is also accepted as the laws of blockades, as well as the London Declaration of 1909. Now, there are criteria for lawful impositions and maintenance of blockades, both under the San Remo Manual and in terms of international law. However, whatever the defense is for the blockade to be in place, one key clause that comes up is that the blockade cannot be imposed with the sole purpose of starving the civilian population. If the blockaded territory has insufficient food, as we see now, medical needs and other needs, then the party imposing the blockade must enable the free passage of food and essential supplies. So that's in terms of the San Remo and other manuals that we've just spoken about. Mm-hmm. So that is the criteria to allow aid into those territories, and the kind of excuses that are used has to be weighed up against the key clauses in that. Mm-hmm. Now, it's often said that there is facilitation of passage of aid into Gaza, together with other kinds of, let's say, weapons, etc., etc. But let's have a look at the findings of the ICJ. You remember that South Africa was the party that brought the complaint state on state. And there were interim measures put into place. Now, none of those have been, in my view, have been respected. And that creates the exact position that we are in today, that there shouldn't have been starvation or means to destroy the civilian population of the blockaded territory. In fact, as some would say, it's excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage anticipated from the blockade. So again, there's a second criteria. Now, the third important thing to take into account is the fact that the ICJ judgment and the genocide conventions obliges state parties to prevent genocide as well. So it's widely accepted by now that all of these criteria have been internationally accepted and have all come to the conclusion through various, let's say, international organizations that there is indeed a genocide and there is indeed starvation. And as we see on a daily basis, fatalities at these stations that cater for food, etc. So is there a justification for this blockade internationally? In my view, not. However, what can South African citizens who are part of the flotilla expect? So the Kaunda decision that goes back to 2000 establishes the fact that the Constitution applies to South Africans wherever they are, as well as the right to diplomatic protection. Now, diplomatic protection doesn't always mean that our embassy on the ground in the area must reach out to the South African citizens that are affected by whatever the situation is. You could, for example, summons the ambassador of the state that is accused of harming your citizens to answer to certain questions. So that is something that one can do on a very practical level.
All right.
These efforts, yes.
Yes. A very quick one, Ashraf, maybe just for, in the interest of time, have the activists aboard, of course, the flotilla, in any way, shape or form, breached or violated any immigration laws themselves? I mean, talk to us about that, sir.
So that depends on how we treat Gaza. Mm-hmm. You know, entering Gaza through the seaport, which is supposed to be, I mean, it's occupied, it's definitely not a different state. The question is, was that a port of entry? Because you could be breaching the immigration laws if you went through a port of entry and you were found to have been illegal or unwelcome.
Yes.
So again, I don't think anyone has raised the fact that you remember the Americans had put up a temporary pier, etc., to try and bring aid in. There was also aid dropped from the air. Yes. So the question is, when you put up, difficulties like this, that you're in breach of immigration, etc., then that is an administrative thing. You can't be then detained for such a long period for administrative issues. Even in terms of South African law, which is part of universal law, that administrative justice must be seen to be done, which is it must be procedural, it must be lawful, and it must be rational or reasonable. So if you take those three criteria in terms of South African administrative justice, I can't see where there was a breach. If there was going to be a breach and you were going to confront them, then the duty is upon the state that's alleging the breach to take steps in terms of procedure to invite the people to make representations or do things up front.
All right.
It can't be that you say, okay, I'm waiting for you, and then when you come, I'm going to charge you administrative.
Because it's quite interesting, right, Ashraf, because, the Israeli camp there had alleged that these flotillas were actually carrying weapons aboard. I've just spoken to our correspondent in Tel Aviv just to confirm if indeed they did find any of those alleged weapons aboard any of the boats. And he says that hasn't been confirmed at this stage. So really to detain these ships might have been a very wrong move. We're going to leave it there, Ashraf. Thank you so much for your contribution and helping us further understand this conundrum there. That is Mr. Ashraf Essop there, an immigration law expert on the flotilla detainees.